Welcome to this special webinar, Hispanic Heritage, How Resilience and Unity Have Defined the Hispanic-American Experience. My name is Scott Carr from Kleinitz PC, and on behalf of the firm's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee, thank you so much for joining us. We will be recording this webinar, and each of our attendees should be automatically muted. Please feel free to submit any questions you might have using the questions feature on your Zoom control panel. Feel free to ask questions at any time throughout the presentation, and we will do our best to answer your question during the live presentation. So with some of the housekeeping out of the way, I would like to turn it over to Nicole Pelchik and Brianna Pendergrass, who will help moderate today's discussion. Without further delay, let's turn it over to Nicole and Brianna.
Thank you, Scott. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Pelsick, and I am Senior Counsel here at Kleindienst. And my father's family hails from Sonora, Mexico. And Hispanic culture has always been a significant part of my life. And so I'm really pleased to be able to participate in this event. I'm honored and appreciate Kleindienst's commitment to diversity and inclusion. We're fortunate today to have two guest speakers that are going to help us, one being Monica Villalobos, who is the CEO of Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and Marcos Tapia, who is the Vice President and Associate General Counsel of Chicanos por la Causa, who is also a client of the firm, and we appreciate them very much. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history and purpose behind the National Hispanic Heritage Month, and then turn it over to Brianna and further to our speakers after that. The history was actually interesting to me. It wasn't until preparing to do this webinar that I really delved into how it came to be a part of our national observance. And it actually began in 1968 as Hispanic Heritage Week under President Lyndon B. Johnson. And then it was expanded by President Reagan in 1988 to incorporate a 30-day period of time, and was actually enacted into law as a national observance, by Ronald Reagan in 1988. And now each year, the President of the United States issues a proclamation at the same time every year to start the 30-day observance. And it was chosen to take place during the 30-day period between September 15th and October 15th, because that time period sort of ties into independence celebrations by many of the Hispanic countries. September 15th is the day 5-day Latin American countries celebrate their independence from Spain. September 16th is the date on which Mexico celebrates its independence. September 18th is the date on which Chile celebrates its independence. And then Columbus Day, or Indigenous Peoples Day, in mid-October falls within the period as well. So there is a specific department within the federal government that is responsible every year for creating a theme for the focus of this year's National Hispanic Heritage Month. And they also commission a Hispanic artist to produce a poster that encompasses that year's theme. So this year's theme is Pioneers of Change, Shaping the Future Together. And thank you, Scott, for putting up this year's poster, which is really cool, a poster done by Mariana Purcell Rivera from Puerto Rico. So with that information in mind, I'll hand it over to Brianna Pendergrass to discuss the Hispanic Heritage Month further.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brianna Pendergrass, and you probably wouldn't guess it from my name, but I'm also Latina. I'm a third-generation Mexican-American, and I've been senior counsel with Kleindienst for 3.5 years. One of the things I love most about this firm, and there are a lot, is its commitment to diversity and promoting things like this, and really allowing all attorneys to get involved as much or as little as they'd like. And here in Kleindienst, a San Diego-based firm, also a location with a huge Mexican and Hispanic population. In California, the Hispanic population is about 38%. But however, the percentage of Hispanic attorneys is less than 6%. Kleindienst attorneys mirror that statistic, actually, which represents the firm's commitment to diversity and mirroring the community that we're in. Of our 94 attorneys here at Kleindienst, 6 identify as being Hispanic. We anticipate those numbers are going to rise, though, because in the last decade, the number of Hispanic law students and Hispanic law student enrollment has really continued to increase. So likely the attorney numbers will continue to increase as well. So we would expect a lot more Kleindienst attorneys in the years to come. We anticipate that those numbers will rise because a Hispanic impact and Hispanic-owned businesses have all continued to rise over the last few years, which brings us to our amazing speakers. As Nicole mentioned, Monica Villalobos is the CEO of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce. That was founded in 1948 and is the premier advocate for promoting growth and success of Hispanic-owned business and Hispanic consumers in Arizona, which obviously, like California and San Diego, has a huge Hispanic population. Marcos Tapia is a VP and Associate General Counsel for Chicanos por la Causa. That was founded in 1969, inspired by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, and is now one of the largest Hispanic-owned nonprofits in the country and was one of the largest lenders for small businesses throughout the pandemic. I'm really excited to hear all the data they're going to present to you guys today and inspirational stories, and we'll go ahead and start with Monica.
Thank you so much, Brianna and Nicole. It's an absolute pleasure to be with all of you today. Really want to thank you for inviting me to be here today. Again, my name is Monica Villalobos, and I serve as President and CEO of your Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So I just wanted to provide you with a little bit of background. As Brianna mentioned, we have been in Arizona for over 75 years, helping businesses grow and scale in their revenue as well as in their locations. If we can go to the next slide, I want to share with you some of the companies that you may recognize that are part of our investor group. And so 12 years ago, we had about 22 corporate partners. Today, we have over 80 of them, and you'll see a lot of very familiar names. So I always like to say we are in very good company. I started with the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in 2012. My background is in marketing and research and a bit of a data wonk, and so started with our flagship publication, which I'll share some data from today. Next slide, please. We really work in 5 vertical areas. We like to say we're not your grandfather's Chamber of Commerce. Our fastball is really economic development and market intelligence. I'll tell you a little bit about these very, very quickly. Economic development, we operate 4 federal centers. We have had the Arizona Minority Business Development Agency Center since 1997. This is a federal grant every 5 years for $2 million, and we are measured by the federal government on access to contracts, access to financing, and job creation. So every time we partner a buyer and a supplier, we are able to get credit for that contract. We don't get, say, the $5 million of the contract, but we get credit for that. And that's how we're able to calculate that we are a $3.5 million organization making a $300 million impact on those 3 measures. We also operate our Nebedsi Center, which serves the American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian communities in Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. So with those 2 centers, MBDA has a national footprint. We have clients all across the country, and then of course the 3 states with Nebedsi. The program that we received most recently was the Capital Readiness Program. The Biden administration put aside $125 million for capital readiness, knowing that access to capital for socially and economically disadvantaged groups has historically been an issue. And so this was really meant to provide that help to get ready to borrow money or to finance a business. And there were 1,800 applications. There were only 43 awards, and we were the only one to receive this in Arizona, which is a $4 million contract over a $3 million contract over the next 4 years. With regard to market intelligence and thought leadership, we think it's really important for our community to be able to own its own narrative. whether you're talking about the Hispanic community, the small business community, or frankly, any other group as well. And so we have put out Datos, the state of Arizona's Hispanic market, for 28 years. We just had an event last Thursday, attended by 1,300 business and community leaders to learn a little bit about the work that we do in data. Datos is the most comprehensive compilation of secondary research on Hispanic consumers. We also do primary research, and in 2022, we surveyed 2,000 minority-owned businesses in Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. We had done this in 2007 and 2012, so this was a great kind of post-pandemic analysis of what businesses are going through. One of the most important findings was that 51% of minority-owned businesses are family-owned, and there's a huge lack of succession planning. And I'll share a little bit more of our publications in a moment. Capacity building, we host about 50 to 60 events every year. We're from very large events like the 1,300 person event we just did for Datos at Symphony Hall, to 10 to 25 person workshops, trainings, seminars, etc. We do quite a bit in advocacy as well. Most small business issues tend to be small business issues, but for example, we are coming out on Proposition 314 this year as the anti-business measure that will be on the ballot in less than a month, and want to make sure that people understand the business implications of that so-called border security measure. And then finally, education. So the Arizona Hispanic Chamber is a 501c6 for the association, a 501c3 for the foundation, and a 501c4 for the PAC. Education, we have a scholarship fund that started about a dozen years ago, and it had maybe $30,000. Now it has over $500,000, and we help Hispanic students go to Arizona universities every year. So very proud of that work. If we can go to the next slide, you will see all of the different publications that we put out. Datos is the one that we'll be pulling from today. And then on the right side of your screen and the black covers are the most recent primary research that we did. And then in the middle, you have a series of best practices where we go in and talk to major Arizona companies about best practices in different key areas like supplier diversity, employee resource groups. And it really is not just best practices, but a how-to in that particular area. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about datos today, which just means data in Spanish, not a trick question. And about 5 years ago, we partnered with Vitalist Health Foundation, who brought a national best practice to Arizona called the Elements of a Healthy Community. And it's all about looking at the social determinants of a healthy community and understanding that they are all very integrated. What this allowed us to do is to take the 10 months worth of research that we collect every year that is vetted through 30 subject matter experts from over 100 sources, and kind of take our 300-page book and filter it through the lens of the social determinants of a healthy community. So every year we focus on a different one. This year we focused on quality, affordable food. And it really makes the data more actionable. I'll give you an example. We know that 25% of Latinos in the US are food insecure or live in a food desert. So now when we speak to food retail partners and investors, we don't talk about the latest fiesta to sponsor. Those things are fun and they're an important part of our culture, but we want to have really meaningful conversations around, here's a zip code that needs access to fresh fruits and vegetables. How do we get a supermarket in that area? Those are much more powerful conversations, and it makes the data more actionable. Next slide, please. I'm going to jump very quickly into a snapshot of population and purchasing power. So in the US, we know there are 63.5 million Hispanics. This does not account for the undocumented or the 3.5 in Puerto Rico. So it is a much larger number than that. We like to use the most conservative numbers available so that we're never kind of overstating the facts. These 64 million Hispanics are spending over $2 trillion in purchasing power in the US. And so one of the things that I always say is that, we do a really good job of making money, a really good job of spending money, saving not so much. And there's a huge opportunity in the Latino community for wealth building, for generational wealth. And so that's one of the things that we focus on as well. For the 64 million Hispanics, you'll notice that it really kind of runs the gamut from multi-generational households. It really is not a homogenous group. They come from over 100 different countries, and also tend to be about 10 years younger than the rest of the population. In fact, 92% of population growth in the US between 2025 and 2030 will emerge from the Hispanic community. So as we look at cities that have become minority majority markets, we will see states follow suit, and eventually the rest of the country as well. And rather than using minority majority, I like to say emerging majority. And this is also a majority that is much more inclusive. We've seen the same happen in Arizona. About 2.5 million Arizonans are Hispanic, spending about $69 billion in Arizona's economy. So again, significant contributors to the economy. We know that Arizona is 30%, that Hispanics are 30% of Arizona, 40% of Phoenix Metro, and more than 50% of our K through 12 system. So again, when we think about the future of Arizona, we know that any companies that ignore the Hispanic consumer, it really is at their peril. Next slide, please. We saw the biggest amount of wealth growing in Hispanic households. In fact, it tripled in the past decade. And so, again, going to that purchasing power and sort of GDP, there's a wonderful report put out by the UCLA Latino Public Policy Institute that estimates that the US Latino GDP is the fourth largest in the world. So if all Hispanics, all US Hispanics got together in terms of number, they would be the 25th largest country, if they were their own country, of the 225 recognized in the world. Now, we're not that organized, so I don't see that happening, but it's interesting when you put it in context, and you see the amount of spending power and wealth that there is in that marketplace. I think for the legal community, it's a great opportunity to think about estate planning and probate, things that we don't think about because you have to get past the mindset of, one, not talking about money, two, not talking about death. And, once you get past those barriers, really explaining how generational wealth is a way to help your family in the future. The next slide, please, really talks about 6 of the 15 Arizona counties here in our state have the largest, which ones have the largest Hispanic population. So not surprisingly, you'll see a lot of them that are that border the frontera, as we call it, that are border counties, really growing in percentage quite a bit. We know that the largest binational population is part of the Tohono O'odham tribe on the border, and they have both American and Mexican citizens, and that's on that reservation that takes up the largest part of the Arizona border. So again, lots of growth. Next slide, please. One of the things that we also share is that in Arizona and across the country, Latinos are not a homogenous group. And we're seeing in Arizona that they are really coming from many different countries. And whereas in 2013, it was about Mexicans were 90% of the population, in 2022, it's about 85%. And we've seen much more of a Caribbean, South and Central American influx into Arizona as well. And my hope is that the delicious food will follow as well. We have quite a few Mexican restaurants, and I think as I drive down in Central Phoenix and in Scottsdale, we're seeing a lot more pop up from different areas. Next slide, please. The next slide is really some more of a marketing slide and a messaging slide. It's an acculturation model. There are several of these that are used. This one is from Geoscape, that is now part of Claritas, another large research company. And it really helps companies and advertisers message to the Latino community. And as you'll see, it sort of rates Hispanicity. So if you're an HA1, you're probably, and that just stands for Hispanic-American 1, you're probably very English dominant, maybe third or fourth generation, less cultural practices. And then it goes down the gamut to Hispanic-American 5, which is much more recently arrived, Spanish dominant at home, and really practicing a lot of Hispanic customs and traditions. Now, keep in mind, this is not kind of there isn't linear movement on the spectrum. It's quite fluid. And what we have seen, and in full transparency, Nicole's sister was my business partner. We studied retroacculturation, which is usually when you have a major life milestone like marriage or children, and you want to pass on those customs and traditions that you grew up with that you may not practice every day, but now you want to pass them on to your children. So this is a very fluid kind of process. You're never just sitting in one. I like to say that if you have any doubt about where you are, look at the way that you discipline your children. If you're using timeout, you're probably closer to an HA1. If you're like me and you still use the chancla, you're probably a little closer to HA5. And then the chart on the left just gives you sort of the percentage of each of those acculturation levels to help you understand in Phoenix. This is kind of, if you're going to message to anyone in Phoenix, this is the spread, if you will, of the different, of the population and their different acculturation levels. Next slide, please. I know everyone's always interested in education. In 2012, we had a real major change in our K-12 system. It was in 2012 that minorities became the majority of our student population in Arizona's K-12 schools. Now we know that in the next year, Latinos will be that 50% of the population in K-12 schools. And I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a minute. There are some things in here that really bear mentioning. One is that you all know that all public schools have a rating system here, A through F, similar to report cards. And of all A-rated schools, only 27% of the student population is Hispanic. Of all F-rated schools, of all F-rated schools, 67% of the population of those schools is Hispanic. So that's not even statistically possible when you have 50% in all schools are Hispanic. And so this is a product of a lot of redlining. And I know one of the questions that we were thinking about was, what's important from a legal standpoint. Arizona remains the only state in the country that has an English only in public instruction on the books. And so while every other state and most countries have learned that multilingualism and multiculturalism are an asset, as a business organization, I can tell you it is a coveted skill in the workforce. We actively discourage this natural resource that we have in Arizona by keeping that kind of law on the books. So if anybody wants to take up that mantle with me, please let me know. I'm happy to share more data on that. And then the next slide talks about sort of college attainment and advanced degrees. And you'll see that we are still significantly behind a lot of our non-Hispanic white counterparts. And so as we think about the K-12 system, not only is it impacting college attainment, but then it impacts our workforce. It also really impacts the economy. We know that an educated populace pays more taxes, and so it means more tax revenue for the state. And then there are other areas, right? We do a lot of pitches to companies that are coming in and looking at Arizona and saying, wow, you have sunshine all year long and, you know, cheap housing. Well, we used to have cheap housing, now not so much. But the one thing that big companies come with when they look at Arizona is employees that have families and they want to send their kids to good schools. Because they want them to attain higher degrees and they want them to be successful in life. And education is always the great equalizer. So when I talk to educators, I say we need to find that intersection and speak the same language between public policy, education, and business, because business owners are the end consumer of the education product. And we need to invest earlier on in our workforce. So with that, I will get off my soapbox. Education is a passion topic for me. I've just got a couple more slides. If you can go to the next one, I want to make sure that we talk about businesses. And from 2007 to 2022, when white-owned employer businesses only grew by 5%, in the US, Latino-owned businesses grew by 34%. We also know that the average annual revenue growth of Latino-owned businesses increased by almost 6%, where it was only about 4.5% for white-owned employer businesses. We see this happening a lot in Arizona. We still have a long way to go on average annual revenue. And what this means is minority-owned businesses, primarily Latino-owned businesses, are growing 3 to 4 times faster in number or units horizontally, but making significantly less in average annual revenue. Here in Arizona, non-minority-owned businesses are making about $500,000 in average annual revenue. And again, these are defined by the census as under 2 million. And minority and primarily Latino-owned businesses are making about 240,000. So really, that's when our work comes into play so that we can help them grow and scale and continue contributing to the economy. With that, I'll go to my next slide. If you heard anything that you found interesting, any facts, we encourage you to connect with us on social media. We're always putting data out there. I really believe that when we come from a place of evidence, we take the emotion out of the conversation and we're able to craft and own our own narrative. And that's a responsibility that we take very, very seriously. Next slide is just a thank you. And the last slide is a QR code to all of our research. And if you'd like to take our survey on this presentation, you will get a link to all of our research that you saw in one of the earlier slides. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Monica. That was really impactful information. I'm as much as I'm aware of all of these issues, it was still new information to me. So thank you so much for that. I'm sure we'll have more questions later and get into some more details about it. So now we'll transition to Marcos Tapia.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Appreciate the invitation to jump on with you all today. As you heard earlier, I am with Chicanos por la Causa in the legal department and working through a whole host of different programming and things that CPLC does. But I wanted to start there, right? I wanted to just kind of start with, well, who is CPLC? What do we do? And how does it kind of connect with some of these things that Monica brought up, right? As far as the population and the growth and the businesses and all of that good stuff. And so at CPLC, if you go to the next slide here, we are a nonprofit that mainly our footprint is in the Southwestern United States. But what you'll see is across the board, we have programming that is in health and human services, housing, education, economic development, which we'll talk about in a minute. But anywhere from behavioral health to domestic violence programs to affordable housing, early childhood development is a large one. We have programs and operations, and we focus on serving our community. And we've grown to really a place where the services that we try to, and the programming that we try to put out to the community really is something that is available for any and all that need it, that would benefit. And so that's something that we're very proud of. And so if we go to the next slide here, you'll see a little bit of that snippet. And so this is from our fiscal year 2022 report, so it's 22-23 report, but you can see here, our total impact as we calculated and we count the different areas and programs, we're up to 927,000 people. And of that, you're looking at an average age of about 35, and 51% of them identify as Hispanic or Latino. If you look at that a little bit further, again, going back to what are we serving? Who are we here to provide services for? We're here to serve the community as a whole. But as Monica mentioned, the population, especially the Hispanic population, is growing, right? And so we are still heavily, and the majority of our folks that receive services or get programming from us are Hispanic or Latino. And so that is something we're really proud of, because we're getting to serve the community as a whole. But if you look at the top right-hand corner, that's something that I want to point out, because it's something, again, that we're proud of as well, that 84% of our revenue now at this point in time is self-generated. It's self-generated revenue that we are able to create need for all of our programming. And one of the ways that we get there is that we have different entities or programs or subsidiaries that will generate revenue for us with a mission-driven purpose. And so if we jump to the next slide, what you'll see is one of those entities. And that entity is Préstamos, right? It's a subsidiary of CPLC, wholly owned by CPLC. But Préstamos, it's its own entity, and it is a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution. And what that is that it is certified under the Department of the Treasury. It is certified as a loan fund. It is not a traditional financial institution, that you would think of, like Bank of America or something like that, where Préstamos does not have checking accounts, savings accounts, that type of stuff. It is classified as a loan fund under the Treasury Department, but it is certified as a CDFI, which is meant to certify financial institutions that have a mission-driven purpose to help, and assist underserved communities. And so we created this entity with that purpose. If we go to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about Préstamos itself. And so, as I mentioned, its parent company is Chicanos por la Causa, but Chicanos por la Causa has really been in the game since the 80s, right? Providing this type of help. But in looking at the success of the loan programming that it had, it created Préstamos in 2000. And so Préstamos now, its mission is to promote, the economic and community development in order to create jobs, help the community and facilitate, that wealth building in our communities. And so here's a little snippet of some of the things that Préstamos is currently doing and has done. And so anything from microloans to SBA loans to technical assistance, right on the other side, where we're helping folks. I have the privilege at least once a year to go and go to the Women's Business Center and actually teach a class where we go through and we just talk about entity creation, right? What is an LLC? How do we create that? What happens? What does it mean? That type of stuff. And so anytime they call, I'm there, and I'm happy to jump in. And so we start to create, this foundation of helping our community, and particularly, again, to Monica's point earlier, as our population grows, well, with that comes entrepreneurship. With that comes, that feeling of, hey, I have goals. I want to do this. I want to accomplish that. And a lot of that comes through developing and growing a business. And so we're there to help in that sense. So going to the next slide here, a little bit more on Préstamos that I did want to point out. And this is just generally Préstamos itself, looking at its programming from the small business lending. We're looking at 6.5. So you'll see here 6.5% of U.S. businesses are Hispanic owned. But for Préstamos, 72% of its clients are Hispanic owned businesses. 21% of the U.S. businesses are women owned. 59% of Préstamos' clients are women-owned businesses. And, in this last fiscal year, 22-23, we were able to reach 24 states across the nation, which led to about almost 52,000 total lives impacted. And then we kind of break it up as far as direct, indirect, and outreach impact. And so that's our programming there as far as we are trying to connect with the community. But what happens sometimes, as we all know very, very well, there's things that happen that are out of our control that we don't expect, like 2020 and the pandemic, right? And so Préstamos CPLC look to see how can we step in, how can we step up to help and or assist our communities. And so that's something that we were called on essentially, right, to help where we could through the SBA and its program of the PPP. And so next slide here, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So as you all remember, 2020, the program actually on PPP went through the end of May in 2021, but it provided dollars to small businesses, independent contractors, that were affected by the pandemic. Sole proprietors, which is what Préstamos was really focused on mainly. But as a program, as a CDFI itself, Préstamos was actually ranked the third largest lender in the country. Only behind Chase and B of A, but Préstamos in total loan proceeds was able to distribute $7.6 billion. And what we did is we said, well, who do we serve? What's our mission? And so we focused on the smallest businesses, the ones that are underbanked, the ones that couldn't go maybe to a Bank of America or a Chase, the ones that needed that attention, that needed the help, that were there, really, looking at something, whether it keeps their business open or not, right? And so we were able to really focus on that. So if we jump to the next slide, you'll see a little bit of what we were able to accomplish. And so that third place on the list, where that landed us was, enterprise-wide, we're looking at almost 500,000. So we did 494,000 loans. But unlike, the Bank of America's or the Chase that had these customers maybe, or people coming in that were getting bigger loans, I should say, or just some companies got really large loans. But what you saw with our loan portfolio is that the average loan amount was only 15,000. We were really looking at those small businesses, those growing businesses, the sole proprietorships that we could help, and that's 65% smaller than the U.S. average. Again, the 7.6 billion. But in looking at that a little deeper, you got to see that for Préstamos, in serving the community and reaching out and trying to help during these times, 44% of our loans were women, compared to 17% of the national average. 54% were non-white loan recipients, compared to 16%, right? Or 16% on the Hispanic loan recipients, compared to 4% on the national average. And so we really, really focused on that because, as you heard from Monica earlier as well, that's where, the economic impact, the jobs, that get created, all of that, we wanted to help to keep that going as best we could. And so help the community wherever we could. If you jump here to the next slide. Préstamos, so as I mentioned earlier, right, we're 24 different states in our last year-end report. But when it comes to PPP, we kind of report it out differently because that was a one-time program. Ideally, right, we're not going to be having to deal with something like that in the future. But that program, the PPP program, did hit every single state, all 50 states and all 4 territories. We were able to provide loans to folks that needed that. And what we did is we were able to scale up using technology, partners, and be able to try to serve those folks that really needed it. Interestingly enough, as you'll see on here, we had in our loan portfolio, Georgia, California, Texas, Florida, and Illinois as our top 5 states. But our top 5 counties will reflect that as well, which is Cook County, Los Angeles, Harris in Texas, Wayne in Michigan, and then Fulton in Georgia. But we hit every single state, right? Wherever we could help, that's what we wanted to do, and really try to make an impact and help the folks that really needed it. So let's jump to the next slide here. And wanted to point out a couple things, and I'm happy to take any and all questions. We recently hit 50 years at CPLC, and so it's something that we're really proud of as far as how far we've come from the days of really starting from an advocacy perspective, right? The roots are really advocacy for us, which we continue to do, but we've grown now into all of these programs where we can help our community in these types of ways, help our business community in these types of ways. And so we've put out some different things that really talk to our story and all of that good stuff. So if any of you aren't so familiar with CPLC, I encourage you to jump on the internet, look us up, and would love to be able to continue to grow our mission and have any and all help that we can from those allies that could relate to any of our mission or goals. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Brianna, again for having us here. And so questions, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcos. That was really informative and inspirational. And kind of along those lines, just knowing some of your stories myself, talking to the panelists, I wanted to know if you're comfortable sharing what your generational journey has been, education and business-wise, from your ancestors to the amazing successes of you.
Monica, you want to go first?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I'm happy to. Great. So I am first generation. My family is from Jalisco, Los Altos de Jalisco, near Guadalajara. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I would say just barely, but we made it. And grew up in a multi-generational household. Spanish was my first language. I think when I went to high school was the first time that I met people who didn't speak another language, and that was really weird to me. But never understanding, wow, what a benefit that was going to be in my career. Ended up going to UCLA, did my undergrad, did grad school at Seton Hall on the East Coast, Seton Hall University, and I'm finishing my doctorate at USC, hopefully next year. And so trying to increase some of those stats. Less than 1% of Latinas have a doctorate degree. That does not include JDs, so we should probably revise those numbers. I lived across the country, 5 states in 5 years as I went through my advertising, marketing, and research career. Ended up in New York for about 10 years. Really learned so much more about multiculturalism as I encountered folks from the Caribbean and from Central America. Again, I know I focus on food because I'm a big foodie, but learned to really grow my palate and enjoy a lot of different foods from many different cultures. I came back to the West Coast to take care of my father, and then ended up in Arizona. I have 2 boys. That is my first job. I tell people I come to work just to feel competent because nothing will make you feel more incompetent than having children. And so we live in a multi-generational household. My mother lives with us. My husband is not Hispanic. He is born in Connecticut and raised in Arkansas. And so watching those cultural differences and learning each other has been a lot of fun, and we try to keep a sense of humor about it. But really my joy is being able to, share my culture and make sure that I'm passing that on to my boys, who are completely and totally unimpressed by anything that I do. So that's my journey.
Thank you, Monica. What about you, Marcos?
So, which I didn't know until today. So thanks, Monica. But I'm Jalisco as well. My family. So I was born in Guadalajara. And my family moved to the United States when I was 5 years old. And so we came when I was 5. My mom graduated from high school in Mexico. My dad didn't get past the 6th grade in Mexico. And so when we came to the United States, we went to Central California. My dad was working in the fields, but ultimately ended up in San Diego. And so I came when I was 5. We were undocumented for about 8 years until we were able to get our residency. And then I actually became a U.S. citizen in my senior year of college. But growing up in San Diego, I ended up going off to San Diego State after high school, and then I came to Arizona State for law school, and that's what brought me here. And so, having my experience growing up and seeing the work of CPLC, and having an opportunity to blend that professional work that I wanted to do, and help the community and all of that good stuff with with my background and all of that, and see how I can put that together, right? Working at CPLC, it really was an opportunity of a dream job for me. And so I'm very excited and happy to be doing the work that I'm doing here.
That's amazing. I know that, Monica, one thing I wanted to ask you about Hispanic culture in the United States. It's my impression and my experience that Hispanic Americans in particular focus a lot on ensuring that their children and their children's children focus on education, because they see it as the, like you said, the great equalizer, as the key to being able to improve their social and economic situation in the country. Does that play out in the statistics?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there are two parts of it, right? There's the mindset and making sure that our children are getting a better life, but there's also a difference, right? We work with an organization called Education Forward Arizona for our scholarship recipients, and one of the things they do is talk to parents about navigating FAFSA, about why it's important to have the college experience and live in the dorms. It's okay to go, have your own place, which is unheard of in our community, when you're that young. And so all of it, you're dealing with the cultural barrier, and then you're dealing with the financial barrier as well. And once you get past that, then, you want to advocate for your children. But that idea of going to school really starts in that K through 12. It's once they've gotten to college, they've kind of figured it out. I don't know about all of you, but like I had to figure all that out on my own. And, things like FAFSA were a lot harder because you had to do it for every school and college applications. And, all of that was so insane. Once you get there, you've kind of figured it out. But there's another group here locally called All In Education that has a parenting academy. And it helps parents advocate for their children in K through 12. So if you don't want your children being pulled out of math and science for their English language classes, you can advocate for that, right? You can make other accommodations if your child has special needs. How do you get through an IEP? All of these things are foreign to newly arrived parents. And while they want the best for their children, they don't realize that they have power in the system and that they have to leverage that. So my answer is yes and no. They definitely want a better future, and they see that. Getting there is a lot harder.
And I hear you saying that there's cultural barriers as well that we as a community have to get over and normalize.
Absolutely. And I keep telling, I tell my kids, like, college and, going to college is not an opportunity for you. It is a non-negotiable expectation. And until we start thinking about it like that, like other communities do, it's always just like, oh, we're so lucky to have this opportunity. No. We earned this opportunity, and we're going to own it, right? And embrace it and walk into it. And we have to expect it of each other.
Right. I think that there's probably a cultural history around Hispanics being very hardworking, and the honor and significance of hard work, and that culturally could detract from promoting education just for education's sake. Does that make sense?
And fear too. I mean, Marcos, I'm sure you've heard the same thing. There's a lot of fear around it because it's the unknown. It's not. We don't come from families that have had this experience. Again, I reflect on my husband's experience, and that was always just the plan. Like they just knew, like his grandfather was a veterinarian from Cornell University. Like that's just what they did. And so for me, I'm like, you don't understand. Like this is so new to our family. In one generation, my family has gone from my mother who picked cotton and then became a non-certified school teacher to me who's finishing my doctorate degree. That's in one generation. That's a lot of change.
That's a big leap. That's a big leap.
It's a huge
Good for
leap.
you.
And you all have made that leap too. And
Yep.
you know, when I think about that, that's change, that's monumental change in generational knowledge. And my hope is that that comes with that same corresponding change in generational wealth.
Absolutely. That was probably the one thing in your presentation that stuck with me the most, and sort of segues into another question I had, which is, are there policy initiatives that are in place to support development in generational wealth among Hispanic Americans?
Do you mean public policy?
Yes.
No, and in fact, I would say there is public policy against us creating generational wealth. I mean, the PPP, and Marcos can, you know, talk to this far better than I can, but that was a great example of a system that didn't have existing relationships with banks. So that first round of PPP, a lot of Latino business owners, minority business owners who didn't have relationships with banks already, didn't get that first round of PPP because they didn't have that relationship, right? And the government played hot potato with the money, and they did what they were supposed to do to distribute it. They hot potatoed it over to the banks. The banks were like, we got to get rid of this, and they hot potatoed it over to customers that they knew, that they had relationships with. And so it wasn't until organizations like CPLC came into the space and said, it's not getting to the most vulnerable who need it the most. And so that's a really good example of how, you know, the wealth systems, the existing wealth systems, are working against minority communities simply because they're not part of them.
That's absolutely right. And it wasn't until the third round, like Monica mentions, it wasn't until the third round of PPP, the third and final round of PPP, that CDFIs like Préstamos and CPLC were able to have access to be able to do and generate the numbers that we did. Because prior to that, to Monica's point, CDFIs, unless you were already a traditional bank, right, a traditional banking institution, CDFIs like ours, that is just under the loan fund, did not have access to the Federal Reserve, for example, right? And so we didn't have access to capital to be able to allow us to lend out and be able to do this program. And so it wasn't until they saw that it wasn't getting to the people they intended it to get to, that there was a push about letting CDFIs jump in at a level like other banking institutions, access to the Fed, all of that good stuff. And it wasn't until the third round that you really see, I would tell you, 90% of the production that we had, 90+% of the production that we had was all third round PPP.
Yeah. And how many businesses went by the wayside before
right.
you could get to them too?
Right.
You know, as it is, JP Morgan Chase indicates that most small businesses only have about 2 weeks of float. Well, these companies had to wait months. And so a lot of them, we saw a lot of them go by the wayside. Now, to their credit, they are small and vulnerable, but they're also small and nimble. And so we saw a lot of them pivot. And so if they had a restaurant that was closed down and, you know, or shuttered, then they, you know, became a catering company and they started delivering, and, you know, so they were able to also kind of maneuver. But that time that Marcos is talking about between that first PPP round and the third PPP round, I would venture to say at least half of businesses that closed down were lost in that first period, if not more.
That's unfortunate.
I want us to end on a really good note here. So I want you guys to tell us some of the most inspiring or memorable stories that you've heard from Hispanic business owners that really, you know, faced the fear, beat all odds, and came out on top, or even stories if it's not necessarily a business owner. And on that note, I wanted to share something briefly I just learned about. When I was a freshman at USC, I was the first person in my family to go to a four-year college. I met a friend there who was similarly situated. Her grandmother had been a housekeeper. She was an undocumented person working for this very wealthy household in Brentwood, my friend's whole life. And even after her grandmother retired, she'd drive by, you know, say in Spanish, I used to work there, and talk about the house. And my friend, who's now an attorney in Los Angeles, bought the house for her grandmother and has now moved her in for her own multi-generational household. And that just made me so happy. I learned that this week. So I wanted to hear some good stories from you guys.
Go ahead, Marcos. God, that makes me
That
cry.
was a
I'm like,
great story.
I'm
Yeah,
all
I love
verklempt over
that. I
here.
love that. There is so many, right? Because we're really focused on trying to make those stories be a reality, right? That they can be told. I think one of the things I would point out as an example is that, a lot of times we kind of think through about, all right, the community or the demographic, what, to your point, Brianna, like what is it? What industry are they in? What kind of work are they doing? That type of stuff. But we've seen, right, first generation, even in our industry, first generation lawyers, for example, Prestamos has provided funding for someone like that, right, that has come in and now they're expanding their law firm and they're working with the community, right, and they're growing this this law firm that's going, that continues to be successful. And it really shows you the diversity of what our community can do, what it's out there doing, what it is that it really is making an impact on. And it's really all the way across the board, right? Not just what maybe you think, or it's the easy example to use, or the one that you might hear the most. And so we see stories like that all of the time. And so that's a great story. I'm going to tell that one to somebody else now. I have to tell someone that.
That is a great story.
Cool.
That's awesome. Very quickly, I can share with you, if you've never been to a Desert Sky Mall, Mercado de los Cielos, I highly encourage you to do so. It's on 75th Avenue in Thomas. And Mercado de los Cielos is an old Mervyn store. It's an anchor store, and they couldn't get another anchor client in there. And so Jose Lagaspi out of Los Angeles, who specialized in Hispanic strip malls, got together with Macerich, the largest mall builder in the country, and they created Mercado de los Cielos. So now you go in there, there's like 200, it's a little incubator of businesses. It's, 200 small businesses where you can get, your quinceañera dress, get your eyebrows threaded, and eat a really good taco, all, in the same kind of place. And one of my favorite success stories, and we write about these stories in Datos, and we'll send you that link so that you all have access to it. But there are lots of success stories in there. Is La Carreta de Lily, which was like a concessionaire. She had she has mango with spices and pepino and takis and just concession type stuff. And she started Mercado de los Cielos with one location, and then on the other side of Mercado de los Cielos, she opened a second location, and then she moved into the main part of the mall, and she got 3 locations in the main part of Desert Sky Mall at its peak. And just before the pandemic, I think the season before, she had opened at Diamondback Stadium. And to me, to see someone that used a little carreta to kind of sell their goods open at Diamondback Stadium, I mean, what a wonderful success story in Arizona to be able to share. And there's so many of those.
I love that.
Thank you guys so much. We're at our time. You guys were wonderful, and I'm so glad we were able to do this.
Yes, I'm honored. Thank you very much, Monica and Marcos.
Thank you.
Thank
Marcos,
you, everybody.
we're gonna have to take this show on the road.
Yeah,
That's
for
right.
sure.
Let's do it.
We're taking bookings. We're taking bookings. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for Hispanic Heritage, how resilience and unity have defined the Hispanic-American experience. We are so very appreciative to all of our speakers, Nicole Pelchik, Brianna Pendergrass, Monica Villalobos, Marcos Tapia, and on behalf of the panelists and everybody at Kleindienst BC, thank you for joining and for taking time out of your busy schedule to learn more about Hispanic heritage. Please look for more webinars from Kleindienst in the near future. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Bye, everyone.